Hello, my friends. We are once again livid with gladness for you to be here and listen to me talk for an hour and then edit it down to 30 minutes about one of my tabletop games. So this is the story of one of the most destructive and most interesting villains I ever ran in this campaign or any campaign, and a pretty good sort of, really spooky, weird serial killer murder mystery, which went for a long time, many weeks that they were working on this, and it was split up as they were dealing with a lot of other problems throughout the 1980s. So a lot of the other stuff that was going wrong in the 80s was also connected to this. It was happening in between and woven into what they were doing in this story. And this is the story of the hunt for a Malkavian serial killer named Garrett Jacob Hobbs. That name sounds familiar is because that is the name of another fictional serial killer in the Hannibal Lecter series. So originally in the book Red Dragon. Although I don't think Garrett Jacob Hobbs ever actually appears in the stories. He's mentioned a lot in the books because he is the character who the original investigator, Will Graham, kills. And it's the first serial killer who he's hunting down with the assistance of Hannibal Lecter, before later hunting down the Tooth Fairy with the assistance of Hannibal Lecter.
This is me at the Grand Canyon. Do you see? This is me at Mount Rushmore. Do you see?
So this story starts in Paris. And in Paris, Lacroix has a meeting with both Cassandra and also a new character, Chozo. This was right after Archie had died and right after Gangrel Pete had died. And so both of those players needed new characters. Archie's new character was Chozo, a Bruja, who was basically your standard character that someone makes when they don't really have any intention of role-playing. They just want as much potence and celerity as they can possibly stack onto a character with the points allotted.
The following contest is scheduled for one fall.
And since it had been a long time since Cassandra had really been in the story in full, rather than ask her player to make a new character after Pete died, I just had her go back to playing her old character, because it was getting around close to the time that I had intended to bring Cassandra back into the story anyway. Now, Lacroix assigns these two player characters as Archons. Lacroix is, of course, the Justicar now of the Ventrue. He has replaced Hardestat after the war in New York and is no longer living in LA or working there, but he has to send them back to LA for a specific reason, which is that he needs them to hunt down a very dangerous vampire named Garrett Jacob Hobbs, who has reemerged in Southern California. Hobbs is a Malkavian. He has, over the years, preyed on lots of different vampires. Primarily, he attacks, kills, and diablerizes other Malkavians, although not exclusively. And he has attacked the Camarilla, the Sabbat, the Anarchs. He kills everybody everywhere. And he's on the Red List, which is the America's Most Wanted for vampires. Lacroix is going to send Cassandra and Chozo to find him. Cassandra, because she's a Malkavian, and he figures she would work pretty well as bait to draw Hobbs out, and Chozo because he is a killing machine, and so he dispatches them to Los Angeles, in spite of the fact that Cassandra is super opposed to going back to Los Angeles. But Lacroix assures her that as an Archon, she is under his protection, so she's untouchable. Divya can't kill her. She's still not thrilled about it, though. They leave Paris and head back to LA. There are two other kind of concurrent plot lines that specifically relate very closely to this one that I threw in. Of course, there are lots of other things going on at the same time as this, as I mentioned, but two of them that really do relate to this. One is they start hearing rumors that there is something weird going on in Vegas. Now, this time, Vegas is kind of a strange place. This elder Zemeets woke up named Laser and killed the Tremere in Vegas and took it over. The Giovanni then bargained their way in, and Laser has declared it an open city, so the Sabbat are allowed in as well. And so you have like the remnants of this original puppet government that Divya had established there. You have the Giovanni, you have the Sabbat, and you also have this super ancient Zamitz who seemingly has no allegiance to any of these factions. It's a weird place, and other than the Tremere being banned from the city, anyone is allowed to come in there. And they start hearing rumors that there are a bunch of murders happening over there, that the FBI is involved, and that the reason that they start hearing this is that this FBI agent, there's an FBI agent who is specifically going around and seemingly like directly questioning all of the kindred in the city. And they start hearing about this and think that it's pretty weird.
Making decisions based on intuitions is always a sign of bad FBI agents.
The other thing is, through some contacts in the publishing world, Jeanette brings Enzo a book, a manuscript, of this vampire novel that is in the process of being published, which is suspiciously and extremely similar to a lot of the vampire stuff that is in the real world.
Tons of people make vampire flicks, like popular characters, but me, I'm going to be doing the real deal. Like, not only is it going to be scary, but it's going to be believable.
This leads them to think that a vampire or someone who knows a vampire has written this book, and they don't want it to be published. The author is this unknown woman who lives in San Francisco. They decide that Enzo needs to track this down and solve the problem, which will be complicated because San Francisco at this time is controlled by the Anarchs, and going in there is a bit of a mess. When Shozo and Cassandra arrive in the city, they show up at Elysium to greet everybody, and they have a bit of an odd time of it, although everyone is sort of unwilling to say anything to them because they're Archons. It's clear that a lot of people are not super happy that Cassandra is back. Nathan and Enzo are a bit frosty towards her. Bertram makes a great effort to avoid her altogether. Divya just seems to be silently seething with rage throughout the 80s, primarily because of Cassandra being there, as well as because of other issues like the shit that goes on with the demon and the evil mirror and problems with the Tremere. Divya is like just boiling with anger this entire decade and getting more and more frustrated. And one of the moments where she kind of snapped, she usually does not snap and lose her cool in front of people, was at this Elysium where everyone is sort of avoiding Cassandra and trying not to make eye contact with her at all. This Toreador named Mama Polari walks up to Cassandra and says, "Oh, I absolutely love your dress. It's so beautiful." Now, Mama Polari is a much younger vampire who only more recently came to the city. She was not around during the time that Cassandra was in LA, so she doesn't really know who Cassandra is, and definitely does not know all the backstory of Cassandra and how she got exiled out of the city. Not being the brightest character makes this little social mistake. Results in Divya walking straight up to her and just like punching through her, grabbing her spine and ripping it out of her body, which put the players on edge. They didn't like that. As soon as word gets out that this Malkavian serial killer is around, one of the first things that happened is Dr. Carter nopes the fuck out of the city.
Goodbye, losers whom I've always hated.
At Elysium, he tells Nathan that he's leaving. He points around the room and he says, "Just so you know, someone in this room is already dead." And then he just fucks off and is basically gone for the rest of the adventure. Through Sly, who Cassandra's player was also playing Sly during this period and doing all the stuff with Mr. Silver, Sly actually ends up being called on by Dr. Carter to help him escape the city. And through that, Sly, the players learn that Dr. Carter has actually gone to Vegas, where he has summoned Vilmer, the Sabbat gangrel who killed a lot of people in LA in the past, to act as his bodyguard. Because although the players in character, I believe, still are unaware of this, out of character they by now have learned that Dr. Carter previously was a member of the Sabbat, and apparently a lot of people in the Sabbat owe him favors, which he calls in from time to time. Running around to look about to see what Dr. Carter was talking about one of them already being dead, they discover that indeed one of them is already dead. There is a sort of like thin blood vampire hanging around there named Dodd, who's just one of those NPCs who's like a wallflower at Elysium, who is fucking dead. Someone has murdered him. And they're like, oh, this apparently is serious. Like, there have been so many serial killers. We don't really worry about it that much anymore. But this one apparently came into Elysium and murdered one of us. I guess this is a bigger deal than we thought. They kind of rush everybody else out home and are investigating. And one of them spirit touches Dodd to discover that right before everyone else sort of arrived, Dodd was one of the first people to show up at Elysium. And Elysium, like many of the gatherers, this takes place at the Egyptian theater. So they're in this giant movie theater. Divya tends to hold court up on a stage. The vampires kind of hang around in the various movie seats. Dodd was off in a back corner, kind of out of sight. They see a vision of him when he first arrives, sitting there, and this other vampire showing up, spilling a bunch of popcorn on him, then attacking him and diablerizing him there. Because Dodd is such a young vampire, his body doesn't start decaying, it just sits there. And Hobbs just puts his sunglasses back on, and nobody notices that Dodd has been dead this entire time. This is also when they get their first glimpse of Garrett Jacob Hobbs, and Garrett Jacob Hobbs is Nicolas Cage. You have to be careful when you bring in an NPC and you give them the face of a famous movie star, that you're going to do some justice to the performance. And I figured that for Garrett Jacob Hobbs, the deranged Malkavian serial killer, who is a serial diablerist who has eaten the souls of and therefore consumed the thoughts of lots and lots of other deranged Malkavians, who better to play that than Nicolas Cage? Specifically, a version of Nicolas Cage who is every version of Nicolas Cage all inside his head at the same time.
What are these fucking iguanas doing on my coffee table? Have you ever been dragged to the sidewalk and be until you pissed blood?
At this point, Max Hammer comes back from Vegas, because when they first hear about these killings in Vegas, Nathan sent Max Hammer to go look into it. He's like, go find out if this has anything to do with us. Max Hammer comes back with a few disturbing pieces of information. One is that there's been a series of murders in Vegas over the last few weeks that match the known MO of Garrett Jacob Hobbs, people who were found hung upside down and exsanguinated. The other thing is that there were also 2 FBI agents who were there investigating this who were also apparently murdered. They have at least disappeared, and now 2 more FBI agents have shown up looking for these missing FBI agents. One of these 2 FBI agents is super strange. Hammer mentions that this guy seems to be psychic or something. He can tell when people are lying to him. He knows what everyone's thinking. And then Max Hammer also tells him that on the drive back from Vegas, he started to feel like he was being followed and that there were owls following him everywhere. This really makes the players paranoid. And they start having the Nosferatu, because they assume that Garrett Jacob Hobbs is targeting Malkavians. They start having the Nosferatu follow all the Malkavians around. So they're like sneaking around constantly watching the Malkavians. They also start assembling these like SWAT teams of cops, some of them Gould cops, others just regular cops, who they're constantly moving around the city to be ready to like react to Hobbs anywhere. And they have the Nosferatu and the Gangrel going out and just massacring owls. It was one of those things where, you know how player characters can be, where you give them a little hint and they're like, I saw that hint, I'm gonna beat the fuck out of that hint. Like, owls are involved in this? No, I do not want to see an owl. Kill every owl. I want the owls dead. I want their families dead. I want their trees burned to the ground. They're just going scorched earth on owls. Doing some various investigation work and talking with various police people and contacts they have around different cities. They find out that Hobbs is indeed the killer in Vegas. They have a composite sketch of Hobbs that the FBI have, and they're able to get a copy of that, and I believe it's Enzo who used Spirit's Touch who's like, yeah, that's definitely the guy. They also find out that this writer in San Francisco they're looking into apparently lives in a hotel that is owned by this Toreador elder. And this Toreador elder apparently never leaves this hotel. No one's seen her in years. She just hangs out there. The Anarchs kind of leave her alone. They then immediately jump to the conclusion, this Toreador elder is the one who's feeding her this information and writing this book. We need to go into San Francisco and shut this down as well. Throughout all of this, both Cassandra and Nathan are constantly trying to use their powers, their Eyes of Chaos powers, to like look into the hive mind to find where Hobbs is, and it keeps not working. The hive mind is specifically like rejecting all of their efforts to find him, and as they do it more and more, they start to realize that it's like the Malkavian hive mind itself is consciously protecting Hobbs. It's preventing him from being seen so that he can't be hunted down by other Malkavians.
You didn't say the magic word.
Please! God damn it!
And can't be seen coming by other Malkavians, which, again, makes them extremely paranoid. And the first big attack here happens against a Malkavian named Jesus Christ. And she believes that she is Jesus Christ. She would wander around occasionally and just walk up to people and say weird things to them as if she was Jesus. Would always be telling people about how they can save their souls and how they need to follow her, and talking about her students and their special place in heaven that she has for them. And eventually Hobbs assaults her. He attacks her in a park or a university garden or something. And when the players show up there, they have like a SWAT team that rushes in. They have Nosferatu who attack him, and they find just total fucking chaos. Like, Jesus Christ is dead and diablerized, but also the cops are all running around firing their guns into the ground. The Nosferatu are like fleeing in terror. Everything is fucked up. Like, everyone here has just gone insane. At this point, the players decide, okay, escorting the Malks around with Nosferatu isn't going to work. What we need to do is we need to put them all in one place. So they gather all of the Malkavians in the city that they know of to Bella's house. Bella is a Malkavian who believes he's Bela Lugosi. There is a whole backstory about how Bella was created that I put into the game, which they never managed to figure out because it was Tony Bagels talking to squirrels who learned about the backstory, failed to correctly interpret it, and never did anything with the information. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. They all hang out at Bella's house for days. The Malkavians are being contained there. Many of them super unhappy about this, except for Bella, who loves it. He just sits around telling ghost stories and tales of old Hollywood, boring the fuck out of everyone, having the time of his life. I mean, the guy loves company, and now everybody in the whole city seemingly is showing up to hang out at his house 24/7. It's like a dream come true. In trying to track Hobbs down, running from place to place wherever he sort of pops up, they eventually get to this arcade, and Hobbs appears there in a sense, communicating to them through a Pac-Man machine. They have this long conversation, Nathan and Garrett Jacob Hobbs, through the Pac-Man machine, where Nathan is trying to convince Hobbs to turn himself in, basically, and Hobbs is having none of it and keeps telling Nathan, like, you know, people he's going to eat and how important his work is, people need to be made upside down, and how this is all leading to something crucial. He's trying to save the world. It was a very creepy scene that the players really enjoyed, talking to a Pac-Man machine. And it's right about that time that the Tremere Chantry explodes. While they are first down there at the Chantry investigating, players run into these two FBI agents who have driven in from Vegas. Now, these two FBI agents are Sam Stanley and Dale Cooper. You may recognize those characters from Twin Peaks. And yes, they are the characters from Twin Peaks. They have a really weird conversation with these two FBI agents which Enzo immediately gets frustrated with and leaves because Enzo tries to use awe on them and it seems to have no effect. And then everything Enzo starts telling the agents, Dale Cooper immediately will tell him, very calmly, but immediately tell him, no, that's a lie. You're not telling me the truth about that. Like, he can just instantly tell when he's being lied to, and he seems completely immune to any vampiric powers, which makes Enzo want to get the fuck away from the guy. Nathan, on the other hand, is intrigued and continues to talk with him, actually shows up at his hotel later to bring him donuts to speak with him again. And they have this long conversation where Dale is telling him about a dream he had where he and Nathan and the 2 missing FBI agents that he's looking for were all sitting together in a cafe eating, but they were all very old. It was far in the future, and they were talking about Garrett Jacob Hobbs. And he tells Nathan that he can't remember the details of the conversation, but he was sure from what they were saying that they had triumphed somehow. They had defeated Hobbs. He also then starts helping them with another explosion that occurs right after this, which is Dr. Carter's mansion. This was partially a red herring, which confused the players. For a while, they were thinking that Hobbs might have blown up the Tremere Chantry, because I can't remember now if it was immediately before or immediately after. I think it was immediately after the Tremere Chantry blew up. The players went to Dr. Carter's mansion, and while they were in there, the mansion blew up. Cassandra got, through a premonition, through Auspex, that they were about to be exploded, and they started fleeing, although a couple of the NPCs who were with them got killed in this blast as the mansion blew up into a fireball. During this, Nathan ran down into the basement and ran out through the exit into the sewers, where he discovers Dr. Mellon. Now, Dr. Mellon, who is a Malkavian who has been in the city the entire game, has never been seen by the players before. They've never seen him. They've never heard about him, with the single exception that they did find out that he was the one who created Bella, but because it was Tony Bagels who learned all of this, they never really made any kind of connection. But Dr. Mellon is this highly perceptive Malkavian who lives in the sewers underneath Dr. Carter's mansion, and he's been there the whole time. A lot of Dr. Carter's insights are actually Dr. Mellon's insights, and Dr. Carter supplies him with blood and safe haven there in return for all of his insights into the cobweb. It's because of Dr. Mellon that he knew how dangerous Hobbs was, but Mellon, being a real hardcore recluse and extremely agoraphobic, Mellon refuses to leave, and eventually Hobbs finds him and kills him. And when Nathan goes down there and finds Mellon's house, he finds this weird, like, archaic room underground with all these ancient, like, record players and books and a 4-poster bed, cats everywhere, and a dead Abraham Mellon, or at least the remains of a dead Abraham Mellon. He also finds a card that was left there on the bed on top of Abraham Mellon's ashes, which says, "I'm very sorry," and it's signed Garrett Jacob Hobbs. After this, Dale invites the players to take part in a crime-solving experiment at the tar pits, where he throws rocks at a empty Coca-Cola bottle after having names recited to him off of a list. This is an idea that I completely came up with myself and definitely did not steal from Twin Peaks.
Dr. Lawrence Jacoby.
You did it! You hit it!
Lucy, make a note that the bottle was struck but did not break. Very important.
Through doing this, Dale determines that Hobbs apparently had nothing to do with the disappearance of the 2 FBI agents who he's looking for, and that it was actually Charles Vane. Dale Cooper's opinion, Charles Vane is just some guy who works in Vegas, who runs one of the casinos. The players know that Charles Vane is a Sabbat who runs one of the casinos, and so they just try to discourage Dale from looking into this, but he is immune to all their mind control powers, and he just decides to take off for Vegas again to resolve the situation. I had expected the players to go with him. I had all this stuff set up in Las Vegas with the Giovanni and this guy Charles Vane and Dr. Carter being there, and these 2 Sabbat packs that are fighting, and Dale Cooper rolling in. But the players never went there. They once or twice sent NPCs to go report for them from Vegas, but they all stayed in LA. They were just completely uninterested in following up on that. And so it pretty much all just happened off camera. They never really got involved. At the end of all of this, they find out that Cooper did eventually track down the killer of these 2 FBI agents, which was one of the Giovanni. He confronted her, and then when she tried to kill him, he shot her and somehow killed her, which the players are baffled by. Now, the reason that this works is because Dale Cooper has true faith, which is a very stupid idea that, generally speaking, I would never bother to put into my stories. But in this one instance, I made an exception because true faith is at least a somewhat interesting idea if you separate it from the concept of religion. Basically, the idea of true faith in World of Darkness is that if you believe in something enough, it gives you superpowers. I think that's pretty lame. But in the case of Dale Cooper, I decided to grant him true faith in the sense that he really did believe in his powers as an investigator so much and so deeply in the concept of justice and finding the truth that it somehow made him immune to supernatural abilities.
I have just concluded my second meditation of the day in lieu of sleep, and I feel completely refreshed and struck again by the realization that all of us on this great big planet Earth live at only a fraction of our potential.
Nathan eventually gets a message from Colin Robinson, who they find out has also been devoured by Garrett Jacob Hobbs. The message comes through a magical talking chifforobe, and in the message he is told by Robinson in this dream that he should come to this hotel out in the middle of the desert where some time ago Nathan and Colin had killed some vampire hunters. Nathan very much senses that Hobbs is going to be there waiting for him and figures that there's a good chance that if he goes out there by himself, Hobbs will kill him. But there is something about the stuff that Hobbs tells him about trying to consume the rest of the Malkavians and, reunite Malkav and become one again that Nathan finds oddly intriguing and comforting. After a lot of equivocation about this, he decides that he's not going to tell anybody about this, and he's just going to go out there alone, which I really had not expected him to do. I had assumed that the players would roll out there together and try and, jump on Hobbs. I did not expect Nathan to take the bait of just like, yeah, I'm going to drive out to the desert by myself to confront this supernatural serial killer. Just me. And so once this started happening, I was really unsure where this was going. When Nathan arrives at the hotel, he finds Hobbs standing on the roof just wearing his underwear, and he looks pretty sickly and unwell. Nathan tries to ask Hobbs about his purpose and his mission from God, and Hobbs just tells him random things. He says that Solid was given a staff made out of thorns by Malakath before he set out on his journey, and that there's a 9-headed demon that'll rise and usher the end of times. He says there's a mountain in Mongolia where the antediluvian is resting, and that during the end of days there will be 3 people on the mountain, and he plans to eat the other 2 so he can stop the demon. He tells Nathan that he saw all of this in a vision after he ate a crazy person. He also tells him that the author of this story talks to him and tells him that in order to save the world, he has to assemble an army within himself. He says he didn't want to be the way he is. He's just dealing with what he was given. Inside the hotel, there are all of these people, all the people who were staying in the motel, who've been killed and wrapped in sheets and hung up from their feet upside down. They've all had their throat cuts. They're just bleeding out dead in the room, and Hobbs is walking around among these hanging corpses telling Nathan that they're better this way and this is how they can be at peace. And then Nathan and Hobbs just go at each other and very deliberately just immediately bite into each other's throats and start trying to diablerize each other. Neither one of them really interested in fighting or trying to gain the upper hand, just going straight to the jugulars. Nathan wins this contest. He manages to roll better and higher, and he consumes all of the blood out of Hobbs before Hobbs is able to do the same thing to him. And after this happens, I told him that he feels like hundreds of different consciousnesses, hundreds of different minds are all swarming into him like bugs crawling under his skin, racing up his body towards his brain. And he is overcome by this and blacks out, and then when he wakes up again, it's daylight and the sun is coming in through the windows and burning him, and he sort of frenzies and thrashes about among all these bodies until he's able to get control of himself and get out of the sun. Once night falls again and he's able to leave this motel. He tries looking into the cobweb, something he hasn't been able to do very effectively while Garrett Jacob Hobbs has been around. And as he's looking in there, he's asking, specifically the first question he asks, which I thought was interesting, is he asks, will Dale Cooper be able to tell that I'm Hobbs if I talk to him? Like, he can see through lies. Will he be able to tell that I'm the killer now, or that the killer exists inside of me? And the cobweb does answer him, but very differently and very strangely from before. The cobweb now speaks to him in many different voices. They all answer him, but they don't refer to him as Nathan. They refer to him as Garrett. While Garrett is handling this, several of the other players leave the city to go to San Francisco. Cassandra, Shozo, I think Enzo went with them, and they go there originally intending to speak with and confront this elder Toreador. But once they get in there and they run into her, they quickly realize that things are not quite what they had determined, and they end up in a fight with this Toreador, who turns out not to be a Toreador at all. She was once, but she has been diablerized herself years ago by a much older and more dangerous vampire, a Samdi. This Samdi falls on the players, starts shredding them apart. I believe punted Shozo out of a window or something, and falls on Cassandra and manages to quickly drain her of blood, diablerizing her. This would have been the end of Cassandra's character, but by flipping a bunch of plot cards and passing some extremely difficult rolls, Cassandra actually managed to survive this, as her body was obliterated and turned into ash. She forced herself into the mind of this Samdi, did battle with it, and managed to overtake it, basically auto-possessing her own body and becoming the controller of this form. This Samdi had diablerized lots of other vampires in the past, one of them being the Toreador, and so had a slew of different vampiric powers. I had not under any circumstances anticipated that one of the players would be diablerized by this character and then take control of them, but it actually boosted Cassandra significantly into a much more powerful character than she had been before, although she was now stuck in the body of a Samdi, which was constantly rotting, and so was forced to continuously use Mask of 1,000 Faces in order not to be seen as a horrific, putrid mess. So when the players congregate again in LA, both Cassandra and Nathan are sort of psychologically shattered by this event. Both of them have basically gone through a weird, like mental break, where Cassandra is now struggling to hold on to control of a body that is filled with a bunch of other hostile entities trying to seize it from her, and Nathan has been so overwhelmed with so many different entities that are all possessing him that it's difficult for him to even focus long enough to, have a coherent thought. In that very deranged and sort of mentally exhausted state, they roll into the very last moment of the 1980s, which is a wedding. We all know my feelings about weddings. And this wedding, which had been set up for a while and which we'd been planning for several sessions in-game, was going to be a wedding between Nathan and Divya.
This is going to be the greatest thing ever.
Someone will die.
Of fun.
Divya had several sessions ago decided to marry Nathan. She didn't really ask Nathan if he wanted to marry her. She just announced that they were going to be married, specifically blood wed, which is a practice in vampire that's not common in the modern day, but was common in the past. It's essentially a marriage with blood bonding, so it's like you're married and you're mind controlled. The double whammy, as it's called. Now that Hobbs has apparently been defeated, although Nathan is extremely coy about how exactly he defeated Hobbs, but he insists that, don't worry, Hobbs was defeated. The players and the NPCs are free to have this big fancy wedding. Lots of important people show up. Karsh, Lacroix, Mithras sends a gift. During the after-wedding party, which has a name, reception, after the reception of the wedding, I forgot for a sec, Lacroix makes a rather dickish announcement declaring that he is releasing Cassandra from her position as Archon. Cassandra then immediately blinks the fuck out of the wedding, I was surprised at how quick she reacted to that. Cassandra's player tends to be a little slow on the uptake, and I was 100% certain that I would have ample time to stake her before she realized the implications. But no, not this time. This time she had learned her lesson, and the instant Lacroix said that she was no longer under his protection, boom, she was gone. Out of there. Divya was originally going to seize her and stake her. Divya didn't even have a chance to react. It made the entire rest of the reception kind of awkward. I'm recording this because I forgot to mention this while I was recording the video. Honestly, I should just do all my videos like this. I should just record myself here and play it over, images of me talking, much easier than setting up a camera. Diablerie ended up being a very significant theme throughout this game. I mean, the first video I ever made about this game was a video about Diablerie, and that wasn't really intended. It just kind of rolled out that way, but I was pleased by that because I do find Diablerie one of the most interesting elements of the vampire setting. Not because it's supposed to be, the ultimate bad guy thing that you do, but more because of the psychological implications of it. That you're consuming someone's consciousness and that their memories potentially become infused into your own mind. If you diablerize someone who is more powerful than you, or if you diablerize enough people, in a sense you cease to be you anymore. It is a kind of self-destruction. In a setting where so many of the themes revolve around the idea of you having a compulsive need to do something that slowly erodes and destroys your soul, Diablerie is an even higher level of a compulsive need that erodes and destroys your soul and literally erases not just your humanity but your own sense of consciousness and your own sense of self. What the players learned through Nathan learning it during this wedding sequence is something that had been alluded to many times throughout much of this campaign, and the players had kind of started to piece it together, and that was that Divya is not actually Divya and hasn't actually been Divya for a very long time. The original Divya, the Ventru from Rome, was destroyed hundreds of years ago. After she had been staked by Hardestat, she was diablerized during the Anarch Revolt when this group of Sabbat broke into her tomb and ate her up. And just like what ended up happening to Cassandra, Divya survived that destruction of her body and her soul by seizing control of the body that had eaten her. And this version of Divya is actually a La Sombra. It's something that I had done through the entire campaign, but the players never caught on to this. In fact, I don't think they ever caught on to this until after the campaign had ended and they were asking me questions about it, and I explained it then. But there were always two tokens of Divya. There was Divya in a leather jacket and there was Divya in a white dress. And whenever Divya would appear, I would roll to determine randomly which of those tokens I put out, which version of Divya showed up. The version in the white dress being the dominant personality of the Roman Divya, who was far more brutal, far more sociopathic, far less conversational. And then the jacket version of Divya being the one who is primarily the La Sombra, Maya. And that is a version of Divya that is, I hesitate to use the word nicer because of the implication, but less brutal, more forgiving. Divya, because she has flesh warping powers, because she has eaten so many Zamits and stolen those powers from them, is able to fleshcraft her body back to the point that she looks identical to what she did in the past, so that even vampires who knew her hundreds of years ago, like Hardestat, don't know that she's not the same person anymore. And in a sense, she is the same person. She is at least partially the same mind, but not the same body. And this becomes a theme that strikes through the entire campaign. Enzo isn't really Enzo. He's an imposter. Divya isn't really Divya. She's an imposter. Cassandra isn't really Cassandra anymore. She's an imposter. And Nathan has taken on so many alternate personalities at this point that it's hard to really say if Nathan is even Nathan anymore either. And these many layers of people's minds, their own identities being consumed and repurposed and corrupted, just continued to propagate throughout the entire campaign. I think it added a real sense of hopelessness. What I've always found to be the most disturbing, the most unsettling type of horror stories are not the ones where you are physically destroyed, but the ones where you are corrupted into something else. Movies like The Thing or Phantasm, the Lovecraftian stories, where it isn't just that something scary appears or that something kills you, it's that you are altered by it. What is you is taken away from you, and you are forcibly transformed into something else. You become this husk of what you once were, and it became a really powerful theme through this story. Either you die, or you watch yourself get turned into something that you never would have wanted to become. That really drove the story for so long, and was a lot of the sort of the juiciness of the narrative that inspired me to keep going. After the wedding had wrapped up, I went to the next night and I said just one quick little coda before we move on to the next chapter of the game, which was that Cassandra, wherever she had fled to out in the desert, Cassandra had a little dream. In her dream, she saw herself walking through the desert, following a woman on the sand. The sky was red, and it was raining blood. She kept running after the woman and hearing the sound of a baby crying in the distance. Snakes began to rise from the ground and pursue her, and everything she touched burned her and cut her flesh. She started to see huge towering shapes moving in the distance, like flickering humanoid forms as tall as skyscrapers. The voice she heard between the raindrops whispered, "Join me." She started to climb up the mountain of sand. The voice whispered again, much closer, "Join me." She pulled herself onto the ledge, and the voice whispered again, just inside of her ear, "Join me into what?" She saw nothing but footprints across the sand, leading towards a house beneath two moons. The house became a giant Gothic church, its doors open, and someone was standing in them, watching her as she approached. "You should be indoors," he told her. "Gehenna is coming." Cassandra exploded up from her day sleep, tearing out of torpor and screaming in fear as blood poured out of her mouth and her ears and her eyes and flooded over her entire body, soaking her bed. And that is how we ended the 1980s.
That's gross. I love it.